again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Straightforward topic, let's do it. What's your downright most scary story? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I was home alone when I was 11. I had just fallen asleep and someone tried to break in the front door. I called 911 and hid in the pantry in the bottom shelf. They came to the door next to the pantry and tried to break into that door too. The police got there, and one of them picked me up and held me until my mom got there. I wouldn't let go, and he made sure I felt safe. I'm 27 and haven't stayed home alone much since. The day I signed a lease for my first apartment, I got a dog so I wouldn't be alone. It's pretty traumatizing when you're that young. When I was 12, I went to my grandmother's, Dad's mom, bedroom to take a nap after watching cartoons. Her room is shadier and cooler. She was taking a nap too. She was on the recliner. When I woke up, my mom walked into the room to call Grandma for dinner. That's when we found out she'd passed away in her nap. I took a nap with my dead grandma. Another air raid alarm just went off. As it turned out, it was the 100th one in our city since the start of the war. The story that is still going on is that I contemplated death 1,000 times. Sometimes it was just a couple hundred meters from where I was. Sometimes I just saw it fly over me. Sometimes I've just heard it in the distance, wondering what the ending will be. During war in my country, Father kept one grenade for himself not to be captured. It still makes me uneasy after 30 years. Also, I almost killed my uncle because he decided to make a joke on me during the same time. My cousin died because she made dumb jokes at our checkpoint. Stupid 17-year-old girl with a gun. One neighbor was captured, tortured, and decapitated. They sent her head and body a week apart. Mother's cousin was killed with an axe while pinned on hooks for butchering pigs. So yes, kids, war sucks and humans are horrible. Going into anaphylaxis, deadly allergic reaction from cross-contamination when you thought you were safe. First, it's like sticking my tongue to a 9-volt battery. My mouth produces a ton of saliva to the point I'm spitting it out somewhere, usually a cup, so I don't choke on it. Swallowing is extremely tough because my throat feels like it's closing up because it literally is, and the back of it feels like TV static. Then it comes with itchy hives all over my body and wheezing from struggling to breathe or my airways closing up. My blood pressure goes into stroke level ranges from my body producing an allergic reaction. It's also combined with an impending sense of doom or death and an out-of-body experience like I'm looking at my body from above. It's really scary not knowing if you're going to make it to the hospital or not while you're feeling all of that. Especially when you're hours away from your family and your ER copay isn't cheap. Computer downstairs would touch type by itself when nobody was down there. Thought I was hearing things at first. Only ever happened early in the morning. Every time I went to investigate, it would stop. And then my mom and sister admitted to hearing it one day too. I wasn't crazy. It happened fairly regularly. We learned to live with it. But then I was home alone one night on the computer by myself. I suddenly felt and heard a sharp intake of breath directly over my right shoulder. Never ran so fast in my life. Refused to be alone in that room again. Other creepy things happened too, but most seemed centered on that room. I knew this guy that somehow got hold of a girl's information. They work in the same company. He's in development department, and he keeps tailing her everywhere. Contacts every person that knows this girl, everyone she follows online, and somehow tricked them into giving him more of her info. In between, he also ruined her reputation by telling lies, but no one ever suspected shit. No one called the police or helped the girl. She lived in constant fear. Existentially, I took mushrooms and became existentially bored. For 3 months, nothing actually touched my soul. Every smile was hollow. I couldn't cry. I felt like something scooped me out. Everyone I tripped with had a great time. Even my cousin, who thought he literally died and was floating in space. Personally, My mom was going through a legal battle with some sketchy people, real people who could possibly make people disappear. Her lawyer didn't recommend she borrow a gun just in case someone broke in our house, even though she was legally gray on owning one. She kept a short 12 gauge from my grandpa in the trunk of her Jeep. Didn't leave it at home where young me could get it. Wise parenting. Someone pulled into our driveway when I was home alone shortly after I got home after the bus at 12 years old, alone. She'd be home in about an hour, but they showed up maybe 5 minutes after the bus left. They parked halfway up the long driveway, right in front of the living room where my computer faced, which I was on every day after school. I called Corey, my mom's metal worker friend, who was like a brother to me first, then her. She called the police. I drew a knife. They stayed, parked in the car while 12-year-old me held the knife, heart pounding in my throat. They sat there in their car for what felt like half an hour, but it was only a couple of minutes before they left. Corey was there first, but the car was gone by then. Corey was in our drive 2 minutes after they left, almost like they timed it. They stared at the house the entire time they were in the drive. That was a good part of what made my mom drop the court case. They won. I had a fight with my parents when I was 18 and I ran out of the house in the middle of the night. I didn't know what to do and I was crying in the middle of the street and a car stopped and 2 men asked me what happened. They suggested I go with them and I agreed because I was a crazy teenager with no sense of self-preservation. At their apartment, one of them told me that he was in jail for killing a man and I thought, what am I doing here? Then the other guy went out and this guy who killed a man tried to arm me. It didn't happen. I don't know how, I'm just a lucky one, because I started talking to him, and he calmed down. Then I ran out of the apartment. Very scary and cautionary story for me. From that moment on, I never act so stupid, and never sit in the car with strangers, whatever the situation is. I thank God that I got out of that situation safely. I drowned when I was a kid, no pulse and not breathing when my uncle pulled me out of the swimming pool. He literally beat me black and blue to get me going again. Thank goodness he was who he was, minor and former police officer, so he had experience with people who needed urgent medical assistance. I was apparently not the first dead person he had seen. You know when you walk or drive a certain route so often that you notice when anything seems different, even in your peripheral view? I was leaving my office for lunch one day, crossing the fully glassed-in catwalk between the office buildings, second floor to the parking garage, when something in my peripheral to the right caught my eye. It was a girl standing on top of the wall on the 5th floor of the parking garage looking down. I was halfway across the catwalk, and I needed my key card to get back into the building. I was searching through my purse with one hand, banging and screaming for someone to open the door with the other to get someone to call 911. I turned around and saw her jump. I've never felt so helpless in my life. I went over so many what-ifs. I took a legal form of LSD, and my brain just had a hard time with everything. By the end of the night, I had no dinner, guns pointed at me, a bag of popcorn that just ended up on fire instead of popping, and sketchy people following me for a solid week. I think I ended up on a list, but I never did any illegal work and stopped taking drugs. When I needed help with an issue, a man started and continued stalking me on Reddit using many different profiles. The most terrifying part about this story is the person asks questions and answers himself as other pretend profiles. He preys upon people when they need help the most. That's when he shows up. He will ask you personal questions and then turn your confidences into blackmail. If you don't comply with his requests, he makes another Reddit post using a brand new profile each time to leak and embellish parts of your life he thinks will hurt you the most. It seems like an extremely elaborate thing to do. Not sure if you knew them in the real world or it was just an online thing, but either way, that's pretty crazy behavior. Number 1 on my list, blocking out a traumatic memory, only to be remembered 26 years later. I finally remembered that my ex's wealthy elitist father didn't want me around, so he took my 3-year-old son to the pool and tried to drown him, or close to, so I wouldn't return. 100% truth. A neighbor caught him in the act and was able to de-escalate the situation. Another neighbor called the police. When I got to the pool, my baby ran to me like I was the best sight he ever saw and said what happened. X's father and I argued back and forth, and I eventually told him to F with someone who had nothing to lose. I think I should write the true story of the circus. Dissociate amnesia is real. My dead ex-boyfriend's drug dealer coming to my place of work to demand that I give him £500 to settle a debt the dickhead left behind. The wee prick had told his dealer where I effing worked, and so the F-wit turned up armed with a steak knife to try and get money out of me. Unfortunately for him, my office director came out of her office armed with a Katniss paperweight, how very Ian Banks, and threatened to do his face in, then screeched for the guys in our office to come back her up. Quite a scare. Still have the paperweight, mind you. She gave me it when I was redundant 6 months later, lol. Was home alone with dogs about midnight. Heavy aggressive banging on the front door. Dogs heard it too and barked like crazy. Opened the door, no one there. Same night, was in bed, heard footsteps upstairs, but they moved, as in, they started in one part of the house by the front door, sounded fainter, walked across above my bedroom and were loud, and then went quieter as they kept walking away. I went upstairs, no one in house, all doors locked, found out my nice elderly neighbor across the street had passed away in his sleep from heart attack that night. A different day, years later, my empath friend, who does not believe in ghosts, was painting lowest floor for me. She said she felt an energy, not a bad one or a good one, but an energy that got stronger the further down a particular hallway she went. My dog and sister's dog look this direction down the hallway briefly, sometimes stand completely still, as if they turned to stone, and run the other way not scared, but as if they just want to avoid it. It's the only part of the house they do not want to explore. Home was built in the 1980s, and 2 Jewish rabbis and their family lived in it. The haunted room at the end of the hallway is where they kept a bunch of very old religious books, some made of worn leather, that looked very, very old, like they should be in a museum. Also, when recording green screen video, have picked up voice of a woman on camera audio. A woman my age also appeared once in sleep paralysis moment. She was a friendly spirit and looked to be dressed in modern, past 20 years clothes. She was happy, not sure why she lingered around if she was happy. As 12-year-old kids, we rode our bikes up the hill off the road down the path to the cave where none of us had told anyone where we were going. We went in and walked around the tunnels until Ray Joe slipped and slammed the only lantern we had against the wall and broke it. Complete and total dark everywhere. Not even a hint of a reflection. Luckily for us, as child smokers, we all carried book matches. Google it. Striking one by one, we inched closer and closer to the way we came until we saw the light from the entrance. Had we not been smokers, we would have died that day. That the Lord above for cigarettes. I was in like 14 on a summer day home alone. I was heading out of the house to a friend's house when I heard what sounded like my youngest brother call my name from down the hall. It was so convincing that I answered, but as soon as I said what, I came to the realization that my brother was 30 minutes away at my grandmother's house, and I was home alone. I shot out the front door, and as I was locking it, I had the most uneasy feeling like I was being watched. I ran to my friends and didn't come back home until my parents confirmed they were home. I guess when I met someone and could sense physically that he would be a killer, that was terrifying in that I knew that knowledge but could do nothing. I could just let the future play itself out like a tape. I remember feeling guilty, kind of like I should do something, but I also knew there was nothing I could do. I mean, I couldn't follow him around day and night to check what he was doing, and I couldn't tell anyone because they wouldn't believe me. I kind of felt sorry for him as well, thinking it's not easy to be different, meaning everyone else was normal around him, but he was keeping murderous desires in his chest and just was a future killer. I remember telling myself, don't think these dark thoughts, think happy thoughts. A beach. Let's think about a beach. So I was picturing a beach in my mind. What's bone-chilling? 1 year after I met him, he buried his victim at a beach. I began thinking that picture of the beach in my mind was probably part of my premonition, but I didn't realize it at the time. Not really terrifying, but I was good friends with a soon-to-be pretty insane murderer back in high school. We hung out sometimes, enough times that he legit probably had multiple chances to murder me. He never seemed off or anything, and then the news of him stabbing a roommate 100 times, cutting her dog in half, defecating on her walls was pretty surprising. It felt so weird reading it because it was so out of left field.